As has become a rite of spring in the NBA, the Utah Jazz got sent home early from the 2022 playoffs. This time at the hands of a Mavericks team that was missing Luka Doncic for half of a 6-game series. Since Donovan Mitchell joined Rudy Gobert in Salt Lake City in 2017, the Jazz have averaged 50 wins per 82 games and made the playoffs every year. They've won back-to-back Northwest Division titles and posted the league's best overall record in 2020-2021. But they've also made 0 conference finals appearances during that span.
That's a shame.
Over that last half-decade, the Jazz have won just 2 of 7 playoff series, and patience in Utah is now wearing thin. Much of the heat has fallen on the shoulders of the team's supermax big man, and it does seem like the writing's on the wall when it comes to breaking up Gobert and Mitchell. But don't blame Rudy for Utah continually coming up short in the playoffs. Spida and the Jazz will be sorry when he's gone. While Gobert isn't the problem in Utah, it is fair to point out his limitations, and how Utah's offense is held back by this 7'1" elephant in the room. The 29-year-old 9-year veteran has never really developed his individual offensive package. Even for a paint-bound center, it would be nice if Gobert could at least competently dribble and pass in a modern game that's skewing more and more positionless. The big man has recorded 200 more turnovers than assists in his career. Utah's latest playoff loss to Dallas was both a sobering reminder that the Jazz don't trust Gobert enough and a demonstration of why the team has little faith in the 7-footer. It's easy to point out plays like this as an example of why Utah's ball handlers don't feed Gobert more. But that specific possession is just more evidence that the Jazz don't know their own personnel and aren't always putting Gobert in positions to succeed. Mike Conley's a veteran floor general who should know better. Who thinks posting up Gobert against Maxi Kleber is a good idea or a recipe for offensive success? His teammates should know what he can and can't do. If Gobert has to utilize his very limited on-ball skills, even out of a post-up, it's trouble for Utah and a win for opposing defenses. But if you get him the ball where he can simply let his size and athleticism do the work, it's often a bucket. There's a reason why Gobert shot better than 71% from the field, but also took less than 8 shots per game this season. Throw him lobs, which no Jazz guard seems capable of doing consistently, and recognize when your 7'1" center can get you an easy basket. Unfortunately, the Jazz still struggle with that last part. You'd run out of fingers trying to count the number of times against Dallas that Gobert either had Spencer Dinwiddie or some other smaller Maverick sealed under the basket, or found himself completely alone, only for Mitchell or Bojan Bogdanovic to look elsewhere or force something for themselves. You don't have to pick sides in this dilemma. Gobert hasn't improved his own offensive game enough, but his teammates could also do a better job of spoon-feeding him, especially since the big man's screening, rim running and vertical gravity, and offensive rebounding are integral to Utah's top-ranked offense. Some, like Mitchell, will use that top-ranked offense to scoff at any critiques of how he and the Jazz incorporate Gobert within their system. But that's no way for a star or a team with title aspirations to think. The margins between winning and losing in the playoffs are razor thin. Even incremental improvements in an area where a team already excels can make a difference. It sure would have against the wounded Mavs. Ding! Somehow though, a more frustrating story for Utah continues to unfold on the other end of the court. As much as Gobert's perceived inability to defend in space or guard smaller lineups has been cited for why Utah's usually stout defense craters in the postseason, the real answer lies at the point of attack. Gobert's far from a perfect big man, but he is a generational defensive talent who's too often scapegoated because he's forced to cover for the combination of inept and indifferent defenders in front of him. Just like the Kawhi-less Clippers did last spring, the Doncic-less Mavs cruised past Mitchell and aging Conley and Jordan Clarkson, among other Jazz perimeter players, with little resistance. Gobert constantly had to provide help, Utah's defense was put in rotation, and Dallas found the open man time and time again. When Dallas made a postseason franchise record 22 three-pointers in a Game 2 win, an unfathomable 17 of those triples were uncontested. That's more uncontested trays than any team has given up over the last decade of playoff action.
That's embarrassing.
A Dallas team that scored at a rate equivalent to the 25th ranked offense with Doncic on the bench this season scored like a top 3 offense against the Jazz in the playoffs. It was a pitiful defensive performance from the Jazz that was made more shameful by the fact they've seemingly learned nothing from bitter playoff exits of the past. Would it have been nice if the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year could have saved Utah's ass in the playoffs? Sure. But I don't know if there's a big man on the planet that could have covered for the Jazz's embarrassing perimeter defense. Mitchell was reportedly offended when Gobert publicly praised Devin Booker's defensive improvements in Phoenix. But watch Booker's nightly effort on the defensive end right now, compare it to Mitchell's, and tell me where the lie was. Gobert's game may have its limits on both ends of the court, but Spida hurts Utah's defense more than Rudy cramps their offense.
The truth hurts.
A fresh start for Mitchell, whether with a revamped supporting cast in Salt Lake City or elsewhere, that inspires him to play both ends, would mean the Jazz or some other team gets at worst a guy who can be a 1B type of star on a contender. He's that good and the ceiling for him is that high. But get Gobert on a team with a competent lob passer, better offensive decision making in general, and where someone can stay in front of their man on the perimeter, and people will finally come to appreciate how much this guy impacts the game. Pairing Gobert with Doncic in Dallas would be the dream. But unless they can get a third team in the mix, the Mavs don't seem to have the kind of young talent and draft capital that would be necessary to entice the Jazz. Trae Young would be the perfect offensive pairing for Gobert in Atlanta, but the Hawks would likely have to part with some of its best young defensive talent in the deal. And ensuring Trae still has help on the perimeter would be a must. Getting Gobert to Toronto would create a defensive juggernaut north of the border. Would either of the Raptors or Jazz be good with a deal centered around OG Anunoby and Gary Trent? Would a Warriors package centered around Andrew Wiggins and James Wiseman be enough? Golden State's luxury tax payments would be absurd, but the Bay Area would once again have a super team, and it would be fascinating to see how Draymond Green and Gobert coexist. The point is, the possibilities are endless, as there will be no shortage of suitors lining up for Gobert's services if and when an expected breakup in Utah comes to fruition. At some point in the not too distant future though, the Jazz will realize their problems were always bigger than just the 7-footer starting at center for them. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video and want to see more content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button.